Now, I'm from Killarney, for those of you that don't know, and I write for a living, and I wanted to read this short story at World Fiddle Day, but there was too much going on, so PJ very kindly invited me to come along tonight. And first of all, it's called Handed Down, this series, and I want to congratulate the young musicians here tonight from Ballybunion and Scart, because the hands that the tradition is being handed down to are obviously very talented, and you're great. The ones from Ballybunion might give a clue or an insight into the short story. It's called Stolen Music, and I had to make it a short story to fit it in here tonight. But just imagine the strand in Ballybunion, or the cliffs, and imagine a cove where you can look down at this lovely sandy beach, but you can't get at it unless you're coming in from a boat. So the start of this short story, which I've lobbed off to crack on with this, there's a man out walking on his farm one day, and he looks down onto the beach and he sees nothing but all these beautiful instruments, fiddles, a harp, all sorts of things washed up on the strand, and the sun is glinting on them, and they're like broken honeycomb. So the short story is based just after the famine has ended in a valley at the edge of the sea, and they have lost all their music and lost all their spirit because of the famine, and even their instruments were gone. They had to sell them to survive. So this man sees the instruments below on the strand, and he goes to his neighbours who have a boat to go and try and get them. So the neighbours are Lehan's. Lehan's cottage had been the gathering house for music and dances. The father and mother, Dan and Julia, who were stretched below in the graveyard, could draw fire and honey from the air with their darting bows. When the hunger came, the fiddles were sold. 2 sons and a daughter took the ship. Of those that remained, Shamie and Esther were the only ones to make it out of the workhouse alive. So when Donnie, who tells this story, came along and told them about the instruments on the shore, Shamie said, "High time it is to bring the music home." So the wind, they got in the boat, and this is what they saw as they came around to the cove. The wind picked up as we rounded the headland, and we rowed harder, making for the little beach. The strains of a tune drifted towards us from the shore. Esther's eyes met mine. An icy fingertip was sliding down my spine. The curragh hit the sand with a jolt that failed to break the spell. High above us, a solitary seagull glided as if it too was held by the unearthly music. Esther seemed frozen to the prow of the boat. I jumped out and pulled the curragh up, leaving the other 2 to follow into the melancholy music floating down the strand to the water's edge. And this is the sight they met. The wind was sifting through flutes and whistles wedged between rocks. Those sounds I could understand, but not the power with which it was tugging at the strings of the harp, the fiddles, and strange big-bellied instruments. I couldn't understand the way in which all the strands of music melded together into a lonesome melody more haunting than any slow air I had ever heard. Notes spelling out clearer than any words the sorrow we felt for everyone lost to us. We stood there, the 3 of us, tears coursing down our faces as if the dark well inside would never empty. Only as the wind began to drop did the instruments give up their music, leaving the sound of the waves breaking on the shore to reclaim its territory. And Esther continued to hum the slow air as we carried the instruments back to the boat. By 11, we were back home, and we had hidden our treasure away. dividing it between the outhouses on their farm and mine, a wall of turf concealing each trove. Just one fiddle lay on the table in the Lehan house, where we ate soda bread and cold bacon and drank strong sweet tea. Shamie picked up the fiddle as tenderly as if it were a baby, held it for a few minutes and put it down again. He did this 3, maybe 4 times, fingering the strings as if they might burn him. Then he cut the bow and released a torrent of reels, jigs and polkas. I believed it was God that sent the instruments as a gift, but Esther mocked me. "Where is he going with his fiddles?" she said. "Where was he with food when all belonged to us were starving?" There were 7 houses left in the valley. The music could not be kept a secret, even if we wanted to. Esther and myself agreed on this. Besides, weren't they in need of the music every bit as much as we were? Over the next few nights, each family left my house or the Lehans carrying 2 and 3 fiddles each. And that was how the music came back to Glown the Small. Through the mild weeks of May, the valley reclaimed the music for itself. Walking the hill to tend the sheep, the notes would float across to me and mingle with the bleating, and it flourished in thickets of mountain ash and holly, and it crested banks of turf, keeping time with the sway of the bog cotton. So they were living in this valley, but they had a landlord called Cobley, who was quite cruel, and a landlord by right was entitled to take anything that came from the ocean, or a percentage of it. And he heard about the instruments, and he began to send his men searching the houses. So they decided that if they hid them under Cobley's nose, he mightn't find them. So they went to an apple loft in the yard of his mansion, and they stored away all the fiddles and everything up there. But he found them, and he ordered all the people in the valley to be down in the yard of the big house at 3 o'clock and on a certain day. So we were there at 3, every man, woman and child of us, like penned sheep. Hatchet-faced men in no mood for small talk, anxious women trying to quieten fidgeting children. The instruments were laid out on the cobbles like corpses. Cobley, tall and spare as a scythe, was standing to one side, wheezing. His face was yellow as a sovereign. They say he was reared on goat's milk to cure some ailment of the chest. Little healing it seemed to have brought him, only the cold, glassy eyes of a billy goat. So he threatened to burn all the instruments unless they owned up as to who hid them on his property. And Seamus and Esther were standing there, and Seamus started trembling. So Donny, the man telling the story, said, "Howl tough, Shamie, a while." One of the children began to bawl. Cobley picked up an axe from the cobbles and drove it into a fiddle, wood splintering everywhere. Shamie took a step forwards, but Esther and myself grabbed his coat sleeves, and the Sullivan brothers instinctively moved shoulder to shoulder to screen him. Cobley whispered to one of his servants. The man left the yard and came back with a tin can. Cobley turned it upside down, sprinkling oil on the instruments at his feet. He took a tinderbox from his pocket, and his hands were trembling so much he couldn't light it, and he ordered his servant to light it. And a fiddle took fire, the furze yellow flames crackling and dancing. The fire raced onto the harp, and the strings shrieked like a living creature in pain. Shamie burst free of us, ran to the fire and pulled the harp free with his bare hands. Cobley set 2 of his men on him, beating him to the ground with cudgels. A crimson tide ran down his forehead. His black and blistered hands loosened their grip on the harp. Esther threw her head back and began to keel. It was the mournful, slow air from the beach. Higher her voice rose. A second woman took up the chant, then another and another. High on the weather vane above the barn, a blackbird spilled out its notes with the same sorrow. The bass notes of the men joined in as, to a man, they advanced on Cobley and his servants. As they surged forward, there was a peal of thunder and the skies opened, the rain falling at such a rate that it doused the flames on the harp burning beside Shamey's lifeless body. A gust of wind blew the smoke in Cobley's direction. He began to splutter and his eyes watered. He was rushed from the yard by the servants, and we heard the oak front door slamming. At the wake, Shamey lay on the kitchen table, his face looking even younger in death. Esther sat there hour after hour, stroking his ivory brow. "Shamey Crater, you were too good for this world," she said. The night after he was planted beside his people in Carrigatha, the big house was torched. I was sitting late by the fire with Esther and a few of the neighbours when one of the Sullivans burst in with the news. We raced to the top of the hill. Over on the ridge, overlooking the valley and the river, we saw the windows lighting up with wild flames and heard the glass crackling like gunshot. I put my arm around Esther's waist and held her tightly. The roof collapsed and a shower of sparks rose into the night sky like sea spray in a storm. That's